Welcome, everybody, to Women's Empowerment Coffee Break. I am your host, Reverend Rochelle Hagans. We're back for another episode of Women's Empowerment Coffee Break. We took a break from last week to let everybody enjoy their Valentine, and now we're kicking it back to another gear. We are here with my classmate Maddie Abbott. She is so phenomenal. We had a class with Dr. Carrie Day at Princeton Seminary, the Black Liberation, uh, Black Liberationists and Womanist Christologies, and she was in my group. And so when we would have our little group discussions, she just had so much to give to us and offer for us to reflect and think on. And I said, who is better than to just invite? And I was like, yeah, she's the perfect person for this. So today we're going to talk about move your center. When I asked her what topic she would like to talk about, she was saying, I would like to talk about incorporating faith into the workplace. And I said, that is great. The topic today is moving your center. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to figure out how we can move our center to incorporate faith in the workplace. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and introduce her. So let me just pull this up. So she gave me a brief bio. Maddie Abbott is a former tech industry manager and current MDiv student who is on staff at River Church in New York City. I introduce to you Maddie Abbott. Maddie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it was such an honor to be invited, and I always love chatting with you. So this is such a treat. Thanks for having me.
Yes, yes. So I want to really just talk about and get started about moving your center. What does that mean to you as far as bringing our faith into the workplace?
Yeah, so something that I've thought a lot about over the past decade. So, just a little bit of background. You mentioned that I was a tech industry manager. After graduating from college, I sort of went on a bit of a career journey through a few different industries. Um, and throughout that career journey, no matter what industry I was in, I found myself pretty consistently kind of running up against what it meant to be a Christian in a secular workplace.
Right.
Um, how that kind of played out for me is I was pretty consistently in situations where I felt that there was a moral decision that I had to make about how I was going to exercise my values.
Right.
And that was complicated by the fact that my values were formed in the church, were formed in a Christian setting,
Mhm.
but in a lot these spaces were all secular spaces.
Right.
So how do you exercise your values that are Christian in a space that is secular?
Mhm.
That was something that I found myself consistently running up against no matter where I was. And so when we talk about moving your center, I think to me, moving your center means actively grappling with what it means to exercise your values as a Christian
Mhm.
in secular spaces in general. And I think specifically as our country becomes more and more work oriented, which we're
Right.
seeing people, Americans especially, are spending more and more time at work.
Mhm.
The question of how we bring our faith selves into the workplace is more relevant than it has ever been. So that's the question that really interests me.
Okay. Okay. Good. So I want to also pick your brain about like how we balance this professionalism, because sometimes they say, well, you can't talk about God. As I was a social worker, and that was like one of the things where I couldn't impose my beliefs on someone else. So how can I stay true to who I am as whatever my profession is, but still proclaim the name of Jesus?
Completely. Yeah. And so where I've come out on that over the past few years, I've done a lot of thinking on this. And one of the things that I've noticed is that a big reason why people feel so uncomfortable bringing their faith into the workplace is because they think of secular spaces as sort of this neutral space.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, there's a neutral space over there, and I'm over here with my values. And if I speak my values or if I exercise my values, I'm then bringing my values into a neutral space.
Mhm.
And after a decade in corporate America and various types of workplaces, what I have seen has really been that secular spaces are not neutral spaces, right?
Mm,
There's no such thing as a neutral space. And there's actually quite a bit of scholarship that's come out over the past couple of decades
mm,
that kind of confirms that sort of deconstructs, okay, what is secularism? What do we mean by secular?
mhm.
Secular is not a neutral term, right? That is very value laden. It has actually a theological history and a religious history associated with it. And so when we talk about secular spaces, those are spaces where we are exercising values every day, whether we admit it or not.
Right.
We are not just neutral people.
Mhm.
And I think when we shift the conversation to being, okay, whatever you're doing, whoever you are exercising your values regardless of the perceived neutrality of the space. It then gives you license to say, well, if I'm exercising my values no matter what, I
Mhm.
might as well be intentional about which values
Mhm.
I'm going to exercise. And that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, you were talking about professionalism and how do we stay appropriate for the workplace.
Right.
I don't think this necessarily means using the language of God or of
Mhm.
Jesus Christ. I think
Right.
that being responsive to your context
Mhm.
is appropriate,
Right.
but I think that just recognizing that you are exercising values and then saying, okay, how do I then translate my values
Mhm.
into language that the people in front of me can hear and that the people in front of me can understand? And that
Right.
doesn't mean that they're going to agree or that they're going to accept it,
Mm.
but I'm going to try my best to translate my values into language that they can hear and understand. And that's going to be me being a Christian in this workplace.
Right. That's good. Good, Maddie. So, why is it important to keep Christ in the center?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that Christ provides a number of things, I think, for Christians in the workplace. So, one, I think that in order to stay strong
Mm.
in whatever setting you're in and to know who you are and to know what your values are, you do need to be drawing on some kind of spiritual source, right?
Mhm.
And I think that prayer and various spiritual practices that allow you to actively engage in that relationship with
Mhm.
Jesus Christ and to know Christ's presence in your life,
Mhm.
that is, I think for that for me has been a huge source of strength in being able to exercise my values in whatever space that I've been in. So I think that, Christ has been a spiritual source of strength for me
Yeah.
through a lot of this and a source of comfort. But then I also think just in terms of deciding, okay, which values do we exercise in the workplace,
Mhm.
especially if we're not using God language in the
Right.
workplace, if we're not using the language of Jesus Christ in our workplace, if we think that, okay, it's just not a space for that,
Mhm.
we then have to decide like what does it mean to be a Christian in the workplace? And that's where I think that Christ's example
Yeah.
for us is so important,
Mhm.
right? We look at these parables, we look at the work that Christ was doing in the world, we
Yeah.
look at the example that he set, and I think that that is the basis for, that can be a really helpful guide for us in trying to navigate some of these stickier questions. Okay, some issue has come up with a coworker, we're stuck between trying
Mhm.
to do what's best for management and trying to do
Right.
what's best for the people who we manage. How do we navigate these situations? There, I think that actually referring to Christ's example,
Right.
uh, that for me has
Mhm.
been a really helpful source of inspiration.
Yes, I love that following Christ's example. What would Christ do in a situation, and we can be able to incorporate that and be able to guide if we're managing the staff in a way that is reflecting the living a Christ forward life. So I want you to kind of give me an example of like how did you center faith in the workplace over the decade that you've been in the corporate workplace?
Totally. So I many of the jobs that I've had, I started out in Hollywood and then I quickly moved over to political campaigns.
Oh wow.
And political campaigns are interesting because they're short-term jobs and they're really hard. They're really grueling. You're working like 60, 70 hours a week. Um,
Wow.
but if you're willing to do it
Mhm.
and you demonstrate your aptitude, you can get promoted fairly quickly.
Mhm.
So that was me. I was promoted into management at a very young age, and I found myself at a very young age managing large teams of full-time employees. So my first management job, I was managing 12 people I was like 24, 25 years old. And I was managing 12 full-time employees.
Mhm.
And it was a situation where things were kind of not going well on the campaign. We were not performing at the level. The team that I came in to manage, like when I came in, I kind of inherited a team that was notoriously low performing. And the messaging that I got from upper management is that if we don't turn this kind of performance around,
Mhm.
we're going to lose.
Right.
Um, and so it was basically like you have 2 months to kind of turn this ship around.
Right.
And so through that, I frequently found myself caught between the types of things that management was asking me to do and the types of
Mhm.
ways in which management was asking me to manage people,
Mhm.
um, which were fairly intense. They were asking me to enforce really like, 12, 13-hour days,
Wow.
preventing people from taking breaks.
Wow.
At one point I was asked to yell at people, like, the types
Wow.
of things that I was asked to do and the types of ways in which I was asked to manage people,
Right.
um, directly came into conflict with many of my values.
Right.
And then on the other hand, I was managing these people and they had a lot of needs. They were human
Right.
beings who
Right.
had lives, needs, sicknesses. At one point, one of my employees actually had to quit and leave the campaign due to like
Wow.
a health issue that was certainly exacerbated by the campaign.
Yeah.
A couple of months after the campaign ended, one of the people who worked for me was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia.
Wow.
Um, and I'm sure that that campaign environment, and he actually died like
Oh my
6 months
God.
afterwards. Yeah. And I'm sure that that campaign environment was not
Mm.
a healthy space for him.
Right.
And so I frequently found myself just sort of navigating
Mhm.
this really tricky situation where I want to do what's best for the organization.
Right.
And I want to do what's best for, the campaign because I
Mhm.
believe in the mission.
Mhm.
Um, and I want to just do a good job because
Right.
I think doing a good job is important. But I also want to honor the people who I manage, and I want to do justice to them and to their work and their lives and their personhood.
Mhm.
Um, and so I found myself frequently needing to stand up to and stand
Yeah.
against some
Yeah.
of what I was being asked to do.
Mhm.
And that was really the first time where I had to make a choice and I had to say, the buck kind of stops here,
Right.
and I'm not going to do that. And the types
Mhm.
of things that I heard in response to that were things along the lines of, well, if you want a future in this line of work,
Wow.
or if you want to be considered a top performer,
Mhm.
this is what you need to do. Or they'd play on your ego. They would say things like, well, if you were a high performing manager,
Mm.
you'd be like this other person over here. They'll compare you to
Compare you to
people.
someone.
They
Yeah.
will compare you to someone else. And so in that moment, standing strong and being a Christian to me
Mhm.
meant saying, I am not going to be tempted by
Mhm.
ego. And
Right.
I'm not going to be tempted by the prospect of, future success in this industry, whatever that means.
Right.
I'm going to do what I believe is right.
Yeah.
And while that may be scary, and while that may feel
Mhm.
weird, and while I may question myself and wonder, is this what the best thing to do? Like,
Right.
that is what's right.
Mhm.
Um, and so after that, I had a number of other jobs in tech, especially, and in campaigns. Um, the campaigns that I worked for after that were not that bad.
Right.
The campaigns were really not like that. But I worked in tech for a couple different companies after that
Mhm.
and found myself in tech in similar situations, where I had to kind of make a choice about who I was going to honor with in the way that I managed.
Right.
Um, and that came at a cost, right? Like I sacrificed promotions
Wow.
um in order to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's really hard. And I obviously like I'm somebody who
Yeah.
has a lot of privilege. Like I could go out and find another job.
Right.
I didn't necessarily need the promotion in order
Right.
to survive or to support a family. Like I
Mhm.
get that. Everyone's coming from a different place.
Mhm.
But to me, after having enough of those experiences and
Mhm.
realizing hey, this is actually something that where I've navigated it enough and I've thought about it enough that I think I have something to share with other people on this front. That's
Mm.
when I decided to go to seminary. I decided
Wow.
moment in tech where I sort of came to a point where I decided I can't be the person that I need to be in this
Yeah.
space. And
Yeah.
beyond that, I want to be the support that I don't have in this space. I want to be able
Yes.
to support people
Mm.
who are in the workplace, who are
Mm.
going through this, who are questioning themselves and who want to stand strong, but who are feeling like, wow, what is this going to lead to? And who are
Right.
scared. I want to support those people and I want to provide them with guidance on how to do that. And so that's why I left and ended up going to seminary.
Wow, wow, that's an amazing navigation through through your journey. I want you to talk more about the emotions you were feeling. Like, did you incorporate, like, did you like really cry out to God and say, Lord, how do I navigate through this?
Yeah.
Like when they were telling you to do these things, like what were you doing?
Yeah. I would say that my faith grew throughout this process. So I
Right.
would say at the beginning, when I was on that first campaign and I
Mhm.
was in this crazy situation where I was managing 12 people and I was being pressured to do all kinds of super unethical things.
Yeah.
Um, at that point I was not strong in my faith life.
Mm,
And I don't think I actually had the words to
wow.
be able to articulate that this was actually a faith issue for me. Like, I don't think at that point in my life I was like, yeah, this is a faith issue for me.
Right.
But now looking back, I can see like
Mhm.
I grew up in the church and seeing my journey and where I came from.
Right.
Like, I was like, why am I like this? Like,
Yeah.
why am I weirdly committed to this in a way that I don't see the people around me being committed?
Right.
And I do think that that had a lot to do with my upbringing in the church, and it did have
Yeah.
a lot to do with my faith. And so as I grew
Hmm.
and as I started to take on some of these other roles, and especially in my last role in tech,
Mm,
I ended up going back to church at that point
mm.
and started to develop some of that faith language and
Yeah.
started to realize and put together the pieces. I started to say, oh yeah, the reason why I've been doing all of this, like that had a lot to do with my upbringing in the church. And
Yeah.
once I could identify that and had the language for it,
Hmm.
it allowed me to then say, okay, I'm now going to be more intentional
Right.
about drawing on
Yeah.
those types of spiritual practices. I am
Right.
going to have a regular prayer practice.
Yeah.
I'm going to regularly be in community with other people
Mhm.
who are searching for answers.
Right.
I am going to draw on a church community
Hmm. Hmm.
for support. And as I started to do that and to be more intentional about that, I got a lot better.
Hmm.
It was still really hard, but it made it a lot easier for me to stand strong in situations where it was difficult to stand strong. And there was a very critical moment in tech a couple of years ago where I was deeply panicked.
Hmm.
I really thought that my entire career was over. I'd really messed it up. I had like stood strong on something that was really hard to
Hmm.
stand strong on, and it was looking like I was in trouble.
Hmm.
And in that moment, I reached out to the church that I had started going to like three
Yeah.
months earlier. They didn't know me well, but they liked me
Hmm.
and they were there for me. And
Wow.
they came through and they stood up and they walked with me through a very difficult period.
Right.
And they told me who I was. I was in a situation where it's easy when you're in a workplace and people don't like what you're doing to feel like you're a problem.
Hmm.
And I think in those situations, it's really important to have a community of people there who can tell you who you are
Right.
and just say, no, standing strong in your values, like you are not a problem.
Right.
You are not a problem.
Right.
Um, and so I think that having that there was really helpful. And then beyond that, I think spiritually, as I started to spend more time with people who were more practiced
Hmm.
spiritually, who were, doing holy listening, who were engaging in regular prayer practices, who would pray over me and pray with me. I think that spiritual component definitely came into play. And I was able to um, listen to God more and feel God moving in my life
Yes.
and to watch the Spirit and to connect the pieces.
Yes.
And I drew strength from that relationship as well. And that made it
Right.
easier at times
Yeah.
to stand strong in my faith.
Yeah, yeah, that's so insightful. I thank you for saying that because it's always important to have that community to surround you, and you're like leaning on them, they're leaning on you to be able to create this space where you can stand firm and strong in your walk with Christ. So that's phenomenal, Maddie.
Yeah.
So the next question I want to ask you is, like, in managing those faith environments, what type of did you have any type of religious, did people know you was a Christian? Like, did you do things in the workplace that, like, oh, because I've had like moments where people like, oh, she's a
Yeah.
Christian. Like, did you have those moments in the workplace?
It's interesting. I People are surprised
Mhm.
to learn that I am a Christian. And I think it's
Wow.
partially because I mentioned that I worked on political campaigns.
Mm.
And the political campaigns I worked on were fairly progressive campaigns.
Mhm.
For example, I worked on Elizabeth Warren's presidential
Oh,
campaign, right?
nice.
So when people hear that, when they hear that, oh, you worked for Elizabeth Warren,
Yeah.
the first thing they're thinking is not, oh, that person's a Christian, right?
Christian, right?
Like that's just not
Right.
the vibe. I think that my politics, people think of me, at least in that space, like before coming to seminary,
Mm.
people would look at me and think of me as political.
Okay.
And so when I was in a tech space, I think the impression that people had of me was, oh, that person is political.
Okay.
She's like a little bit of an activist.
Right.
But it's interesting because when I was on campaigns,
Mm.
you know, it was like I didn't entirely fit there either
Hmm.
because, while I agree with certain policy positions, um, I don't think that a soup that I don't think that materialism explains everything. Like, I don't think that people are solely motivated by like rational self-interest
Mm.
or uh material desires. Like I don't believe that. I think that people have deep spiritual needs. And my experience in politics was that most people, most voters who I
Right.
talk to,
Mm.
they're not just voting out of some like rational self-interest because,
Mm.
oh, I want more money or I want to be able to
Right.
provide for my family. We typically think of that.
Mm.
Most people are voting because they see themselves as like moral individuals
Yes.
who have some kind of deep spiritual need, and they're voting from that place.
Right.
And so that's really, people saw me as political, and what they didn't see was what my politics were
Right.
and the basis of that. And
Mm.
really the root, the foundation of everything for me
Right.
um, was faith. And it took me a while to understand that and to be able to
Right.
articulate that because I grew up in the church, but
Yeah.
it took me a while to be able to say that.
Hmm.
But once I was able to say that to myself, at least, it was like, oh, I am able to understand where I fit more.
Right.
And that is what led me to go to seminary. But I would say, yeah, I it's interesting. People don't really see the
Right.
Christian thing coming.
Right.
And when I say it, they're normally a bit surprised. And I see
Right.
that as an asset because
Right.
it means that I get to go into spaces
Right.
where Christians don't typically go.
Right.
And it means that I found that people generally, when they find out that I'm a Christian, they respond with curiosity. They're generally
Right.
like, they're
What?
confused. And
Yes.
then they're like, what? And
Yes.
then that's an opportunity for me
Right.
to explain where I'm at.
Right.
And as long as I'm being a person where I know that I'm integrated with my values, I know that people can sense that. People can
Right.
sense that I know where I'm coming from, that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm comfortable with myself.
Right.
And I do think that it makes people more curious about Christianity. I do think it brings down some of the skepticism and some of people's
Right.
walls about talking about faith.
Right.
And that's been really helpful for me. So I would say that bringing faith into these spaces, for me at least, has not looked like saying, have you heard the good news of Jesus Christ today?"
Right.
It's been a lot more of like, what do you do? I go to seminary and I work
Right.
for a church and I
Right.
preach.
Right.
And they're like,
Yeah.
what?
What?
Like, what? And I'm able to kind of say, yeah,
Yeah.
and here's my background, here's why, and even without even saying why I do it, it automatically changes people's perceptions of what
Right.
Christianity is, what it can be.
Uh-huh.
Just even by just being myself and being a Christian, people become more curious about
Yeah.
Christianity and people
Yeah.
become less weird about it.
Yeah, yeah. So, I heard you talk about like being a little bit of an activist. Like, how did your faith play into being this activist you talk about?
Yeah, this is so funny. I was recently reflecting on when I was a kid, my mom would have she would buy these VeggieTales VHS tapes.
Yeah.
And there was one called Rack, Shack, and Benny,
Mm-hmm.
which is based on the Bible story about
Mm-hmm.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But it's with these talking vegetables who work at a chocolate factory,
Mm-hmm.
and the boss of the chocolate factory tries to get them to worship this like large chocolate bunny,
Right.
and they refuse and they go in the furnace. Anyway, it's like a fictional, it's a very absurd, fictionalized version of the
Yeah.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I fully realized how much that VeggieTales video had influenced me
Mm-hmm.
until I started, in the workplace in my 20s and repeatedly started becoming that person
Mm-hmm.
who was just not willing to bow down
Right. Come on.
to kind of
Come
like
on, Maddie.
arbitrary
Yes.
stuff where I was like,
Right.
what? You want me to do what? Like,
Right.
no, that's obviously wrong.
Right.
No. And I think I would look around and be like, why are we all doing this? Like, this
Right.
is terrible.
Right.
And I do like, and so the that question of like, why am I like this?
Right.
Really drove me for a while. I was so confused and I felt really alienated from the
Right.
people around me because I was like, is
Right.
there something wrong with me?
Come on.
And then I think I finally realized like it really was that VeggieTales video. And
Right.
beyond that VeggieTales video,
Right.
it was growing up in a
Yeah.
community of people and being formed by a community of people who every single Sunday would emphasize the importance of standing up for what's right,
Yeah.
even when it's hard.
Right.
And it made me realize how unique that is and
Mm.
how that is a very special thing. And it's an honor to be formed by a community of people who
Right.
emphasize that.
Right.
So to me, these people at this tech company, they look at me and what they see is some like activist who's calling out sexism in the workplace,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
For example.
Mm.
And for me, what it really is it's bearing prophetic witness. And
Yeah.
I really do think that that is a strong tradition that Christianity has to offer the world,
Mm.
and a mindset that Christianity has to offer the world, and a network of communities
Right.
that foster that and enable that
Right.
Christianity has to offer the world. Because again, I don't think that you can do that
Mm.
well and sustainably in the long term
Right.
unless you are drawing on strength from God and also drawing on strength from a community of people who are
Right.
telling you who you are and who are telling you what's true.
Yes, yes. That is so good. I love that. I feel like the Veggie Tale story kind of planted a seed in your life at a
Yeah.
young age, and the Lord just like watered that thing, and it's like it's really just really living true in your life, and I really do appreciate you sharing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's phenomenal. That's
It's
phenomenal.
so
Yeah,
crazy because it's like Laura Carrot and like Bob the Tomato,
right,
like dealing with like chocolate bunnies, but
right,
it made an impact and like, that Bible story stuck with me and
right.
I think it's important.
Right, right. So, how do we overcome stereotypes and misunderstandings about Christianity? You said how you people don't see Christian in you, and then when you say what you do, they're like, "What?" Like, how do you overcome those stereotypes after you reveal like you're a seminarian, you preach, you work for a church?
Yeah. I One thing that I really took away from working in politics. So when I worked in politics, I would talk to tons of voters all of the time.
Mm, mm,
And what I learned from that and from looking at a lot of data on this is that people know when you're trying to convince them of something.
Yeah.
And the moment they know that you're trying to convince them of something,
Hmm.
they tune out. They're like,
Yeah.
sorry,
Right.
they're gone. They're
Yeah.
like, bye. And it's why part of the reason why I left campaigns is because there's a lot of data that shows that campaigns on average do not persuade anyone because
Wow.
voters, like, they watch the commercials, they see the people come to their door, they're like, goodbye.
Mm-mm.
They're
Right.
they're they know that they're being advertised to, and they're not having it. Um, and so I found that, you know, I don't argue with people. That's not a
Right.
thing that I do. I don't do it politically. I don't do it about religion.
Right.
I do form relationships
Hmm.
with people who hold different views from me.
Right.
Whether that's religious views, whether it's
Yeah.
political views, I'm friends with all kinds of people,
Mm-hmm.
many of whom do not agree with the things that I support, many of whom would not vote for the candidates that I work for, and that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I truly believe that the best way to get people to understand where you're coming from is to just be friends with them and to be in
Yeah.
relationship with them and to
Mm-hmm.
be authentic to who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then to also do your best to actually try to understand where they are coming from. Because I think the Lord works through other people in your life.
Right.
And if you're not open to the Lord working through other people to get to you,
Right.
the Lord is not going to work through you to get to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that to me, it's really important to be open to the Lord working through other people to get to me in order for me to get to other people through the Lord.
Yes. Yes. So I want to talk about like um how do we build bridges with our colleagues?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, I think it's important to first do some like inner work and
Mm-hmm.
to understand and to like shift your mindset internally. Because I think that for me, especially, it was difficult for me to understand that the workplace is inherently values laden, right?
Right.
Like okay, if you're going to be bringing your faith into the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
to do that confidently, you need to know that you're not imposing.
Right.
And to me, knowing that I wasn't imposing meant knowing that this workplace already has a ton of values going on.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what I do, I am exercising my values. So
Mm-hmm.
I might as well be intentional about it. There's no escaping the values of this space.
Mm-hmm.
And once I was able to kind of admit that to myself and do that inner work and to then know what I believed, just know what my values were,
Mm-hmm.
it made it possible for me to show up authentically in that space as myself. And I think when I started to do that, and then on top of that, demonstrated curiosity about other people's experience and went out of my way to form relationships with people
Mm-hmm.
based on mutual trust and respect, you know, the conversations just kind of happen at that point, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
if you're asking people, what do you think we should do? Like, what do you think about what is going on in this
Right.
workplace? Like, I
Yeah.
genuinely, like, not with a goal to like convince, but like, how are you feeling about it?
Right.
Like, what do you believe? And when you ask those types of questions, I've found that the answers that I was getting were pretty similar to the things that
Right.
I thought. It was like, oh
Right.
yeah, once you actually start to dig, everyone sees what's going on.
Right.
We all know.
Right.
The difference is that we think that we're alone
Right.
and that we think that we're thinking these things on our own and that we're like, somehow, on our own dealing with this. We're not alone. And that's an illusion. And that's an illusion that, frankly, management wants to keep up because it benefits them when people think that they're alone. I was
Right.
I was told by HR on multiple occasions, you don't want to be talking about these types of things with other people in this
Wow.
workplace because that's unprofessional.
Mm.
And that is one that arguably violates Title VII of
Wow.
that's arguably illegal.
Right.
And two, that's a tactic
Right.
that they use because they know that we are stronger when we are together. So I think
Yeah.
that honestly, just being curious about people's experiences, being true to your values and true to yourself, honestly voicing that, and then also demonstrating curiosity,
Yeah.
I was able to form relationships that were genuine.
Right.
And those relationships gave me the strength to stand strong when it was hard. And I also was able to give other people the strength to speak up um,
Right.
when they were feeling like it was hard to speak up.
Right. Right.
And that's one of the things that I'm proudest of is supporting other people in speaking up when they felt like that was not a reasonable thing for them to do, or when they felt like they were going to face consequences for doing that.
Right. 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 So, like, how do we start the process in engaging Christianity in the workplace?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that for me, that kind of starts with knowing your own faith. And so it
Mhm.
probably starts outside of the workplace with, making sure that you're good in your own faith life. Do you
Mhm.
have a community outside of work? And increasingly, we're seeing as work starts to take over more and more of our lives, more and more Americans do not have a
Mhm.
community outside of work that they can
Right.
draw on. And
Mhm.
what that does is it makes work when work is your
Yeah.
primary community,
Right.
what's going to happen when work is doing something that's unethical? You're not
Right.
going to have the strength to stand up against it, because if you lose that community, you lose
Yes.
everything.
Yeah.
And so I think it's actually really important to have a community outside of work
Mhm.
that you can draw on for support.
Right.
And that is one thing that I think, that is one role that I think church plays. And it's a major reason why I went to seminary.
Right.
I believe that more people should have a primary community outside of work that they can draw on for support, strength, and comfort.
Mhm.
And when you decenter work, when you move your center
Come on,
so
decent
that
work.
when you move your center so that work is not the center of your life,
Yes.
that's the first thing that
Uh-huh.
allows you to actually bring Christianity into the workplace. So
Yes.
making work not the center and making Christ and making church the center,
Yeah.
that allows you to then, okay, get the strength where you can then go back into that workplace. And all of a sudden, after that, it's going to feel a lot easier once you've decentered work to do that.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Decenter the work. I love it. That's a gem right there. Yes.
Yes, decenter the work.
And you were also you talked about earlier about looking for opportunities to engage. So we already talked about that, but how can we reflect on how work contributes to a greater purpose that aligns with God's plan?
Yeah, I think that this is especially important in an era where every company right now is like mission driven, right? So
Hmm.
every, like Uber, for example, is like changing the way the world moves.
Right.
And DoorDash is like, I don't know, feeding the world or something. Like all of these companies, it's not just like, oh, we're a company that like provides a product. It's like, no, we are on some like deeply spiritual mission. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, right? Because I think that the things that we do in a workplace do matter, right? The things that we make, the things that we manage, the things that we do, they impact people's lives, and
Right.
doing them well matters. Like that does make an impact.
Mhm.
Um, but I think what I've found is that when we make our mission our company's mission,
Mhm.
we cannot make Christ our mission,
Right.
And so I think it's important not to conflate the mission of our company
Mhm.
with the mission of our lives.
Mhm. Ooh,
Um,
that's deep.
and so, yeah, I think in a world where work is increasingly taking over our lives, it is very easy for our company's mission
Mhm.
to become our life mission.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So I think in order to, put things in right relationship and to be in right relationship with God, I think again, stepping outside of that for a moment and saying, okay, doing a good job, what does doing a good job do, right? Like,
Right.
who am I benefiting? And there might be many people, right? The people you manage, right? As a manager, especially, like,
Mhm.
you have a huge impact on the people you manage. Or even, okay, say you're not a manager, say you work in customer service, right? The people who you serve on a daily basis, you make a huge impact on their lives by
Right.
doing a good job. And so remembering that and like remembering why you do what you do, that is wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, but I think sometimes companies can leverage that in a way to get you to do things that are against your values. And so I
Right.
think
Right.
reflecting on like when you're asked to do something and it feels weird, like reflecting, like taking a moment, taking a step back and saying, is that my values?
Right.
You know, is that
Yeah.
what we want to be doing here? Is
Right.
that actually helping people?
Hmm.
What are we really doing here?
Right.
I think that that's important.
Yes, yes, yes. So how do we even know, like, before we like apply for a job, like, it does it align with um our why?
Yeah. So this is actually something at my last tech company that I worked at. I actually asked this in the two last round interviews. They had
Mhm.
an 8 interview process, which was kind of crazy. But in the last 2 rounds of the interview process, they asked, do you have any questions for me? And the question that I asked in both rounds of the interview was, how do you navigate ethical decision making?
Right.
And I explicitly said, I know that balancing ethics with other concerns is a challenge. I want to acknowledge that. Um, but it's important to me that I work for a company
Hmm.
that intentionally, understands its values and is considering ethics in its decision-making process. Like, how do
Right.
you do that?
Hmm.
Um, and, in retrospect, the answers that I got were not great,
Wow.
frankly.
Hmm.
And I probably should have, I don't know, considered that more as part of
Right.
the process. So I'm saying, like, I do think that you can ask that as part of an interview process,
Mm.
but it's not just asking that, it's also then being willing to say, you know what, like, maybe this job is not for me.
Right.
Or, you could also make an alternative decision and say, well, okay, I know that I'm going into a space where the values that I'm going to be practicing are not going to align with the values of the organization. But I'm going in as a bit of a renegade, and that's okay. And I think it's just good to know that going in. Like,
Mm.
if you're going in as a renegade, know that.
Right.
And it'll help you have more peace when things get hard. So that
Right.
when you are, 6 months later, when you're being a renegade and people don't like that,
Right.
you're not sitting there in this angst and agitus being like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? You're able to say, no, I came in and like I knew I was going to be a renegade and this is just the space. This is who I am in the space. And you're able to be proud of that.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I got one more question before
Yeah.
we transition into the interviewers, I mean the interview the audience Q&A portion where they begin to ask questions. So as you guys are listening to us talk, please engage in the comments. Please ask your questions. We're welcoming them. We want to learn, we want to build, we want to grow. This is what this platform is all about. So the last question I have for you is what are some ways that we can stay grounded when we're faced with stress?
What are some ways what are some ways that we can stay grounded when our faith is stressed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think that in a culture that emphasizes productivity
Hmm.
above everything else,
Right.
it can be really hard to justify prioritizing time away from your work.
Hmm.
And I think it's really easy, and I felt this to feel guilty
Right.
for taking any time away from your work. I used to wake
Right.
up at like 5 or 6 a.m. and immediately be on Slack and immediately be on email and feel guilty for even, going for a walk or like eating
Hmm.
breakfast or things like that. I say that and now I say that I'm like, well, that's insane.
Hmm.
And I look back on that and I'm like, well, that was crazy.
Right.
Um, but I think that that is something that's hard to remember at points. It's like, okay, you get to decide to have daily habits
Hmm.
that you do simply to keep you in a place where you can do this.
Yeah.
And one of those habits that you can choose to have is a daily practice where you connect with God.
Yeah.
And there are a number of ways to do that. I'm running the youth program at my church right now, and we're doing a unit on spiritual practices. And so we're looking at different prayer practices, Bible practices, artistic practices,
Mhm.
journaling practices, reflective practices. There's all kinds of um, regular practices that you can have to kind of connect with God and to stay grounded. Um, and I think that especially when you're in a job that is all consuming,
Mhm.
it's really important to make time for that, as
Yeah.
hard as it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you so much for just your insights on life and insights and everything. So I have a couple questions. Oh, got
Yeah.
quite a few questions.
Oh, wow.
So, the first question that I have is, what fears do you have to overcome in the process of moving your center?
What fears? Wow. So many.
Mhm.
I think it's really easy to talk in the abstract about standing strong in your faith in the workplace.
Mhm.
And it is one of the hardest things that I have ever done because you're sitting there and you're looking around at all these other people around you who are just doing their job as
Mhm.
they're asked to do it.
Right.
And the biggest and you're constantly questioning yourself like why can't I just be one of the people around me who
Right.
just does their job? Like
Right.
why can't I be one of those people? Am I an underperformer? Am I lazy?
Mhm.
Am I a problem?
Mhm.
Am I dramatic? It's so easy
Right.
to question yourself and to
Yeah.
say, what am I doing? And it's hard because the person on the other side of that, like your manager or
Mhm.
management,
Mhm.
is going to reinforce all of those fears, right? If you like, you can't. And I at one point did this. I said, am I being crazy? And they'd be like, well, honestly, other people aren't doing this. Like they'll play on those fears. They'll say like, well, other people aren't doing this, or it seems like you're being over dramatic, or it seems like you're just not willing to do the job in this way.
Mhm.
And it's really easy to take that personally and to say, well, I guess I just don't measure up.
Right.
And I think one of the hardest things to do is to say, I'm not going to let someone else
Mhm.
use my ego against me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let this idea of, the person I could be
Right.
distract me from staying true to my faith.
Right.
So that's a huge fear that I had
Mhm.
was if I stand strong in my faith, does that mean that I'm a low performer?
Wow.
Um, and I think being willing to question what it means to be a high performer is
Mhm.
one of the hardest things that you can do.
Right, right. Good. That's good, good, good response. The next question is, how do you deal with people who don't understand or support your growth?
How do I deal with people who don't understand or support my growth?
Mm.
Yeah, so I think that there's a few different ways that I've dealt with that previously. I think so one, I at various points have taken this very personally. So
Mm.
I don't think that this is like an easy thing to deal with.
Right.
Um, but I do think that there's a period of time
Mm.
when you kind of need to give those people a chance, right? When you try to work with them, when you try to explain yourself. And I think in that process, it's also important to do all the normal good people skill things and to
Right.
say, to affirm the other person, to affirm what you see in the other person, to
Mm.
make clear that you would like to do a good job, and to make clear that you're there for the right reasons, right? So I think, trying to make a good impression, while also trying to explain your values is important. And I think there's a period of time in which you can do that. And there can be a kind of push-pull of like, hey, you know, are you willing to
Mm.
create space for me to be myself in this workplace? And there have been various ways in which I've like explicitly, you know, put that question to people. And I've said, here's what I need in
Mm.
order to be myself in this workplace. I
Right.
completely understand if like, that's not something you're willing to do, but
Right.
this is kind of what I need. And that's a really hard thing to say. Like that's a really hard thing to do.
Mm.
And then I think there comes a point where like, okay, we've had this time of like push pull, and now this time needs to kind of come to an end. And you either come to a place where you can stay at that workplace, or you come to a place where you say, I maybe need to start the process of looking for something else. And that's where it came to for me, where I had to decide that I was going to extricate myself from,
Yeah.
those situations and to say, I need to get out.
Yes. That's good. 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 So the next question is, what are three practical steps someone can take today to start shifting their center?
Ooh, to start shifting their center.
Yeah.
So I would say one is find a daily spiritual practice
Mhm.
that you can do that strengthens your relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so I know that a lot of people are into a daily Bible practice, and that can be
Mhm.
great. I know the Bible Project is great for that. They have reading plans. I know the Bible Challenge has like, if you want to read the Bible in a year, you can do that. So I know some people are into like the daily Bible practice. Um, but I think outside of that, I think regular prayer practices, journaling practices, things like that. A second thing that I think people can do, I am very much a believer in finding a community outside of work and even at times outside of your family. Like I think family can be such a great and grounding place for you, but I also think even finding something outside of that can be really helpful at times, just to give you a different perspective that you can draw on for strength.
Yeah.
Um, and decentering work means recentering something else. And so I
Yeah.
think that recentering a community is important. And then I think finally, courage is really hard to build up, and courage is a muscle.
Yeah.
So I think building courage, that takes practice, and I think it starts small. So I think it means being honest with someone in your life who you trust about how you
Yeah.
feel and what your values are,
Yeah.
when that's hard. And maybe it starts with a small thing.
Mhm.
And you do that bit by bit, you do it little by little. And the more you do it, and the more you find ways to do that compassionately but authentically, the more practice you're going to be, so that when it's really hard for you in the workplace to do it, you're going to be in a place where, okay, this is hard, but I can do it. And you'll know that you can do it.
Yes. I love when you said courage is a muscle. Like that is so good. Oh my God. This is you. Come on, them nuggets. Go and drop them nuggets. Okay. So the next question I have is if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give her?
Yeah. I think the advice that I would give her, and it's so easy for me to say this now, but and it was so hard then. I think it would have been to find a faith community earlier. And it's not like I wasn't, like I was going out and I was looking for churches,
Mhm.
but I think that I was really willing to settle for, you know, this is a space that's comfortable
Mhm.
versus this is a space that is going to support me in being the person
Yeah.
who I know I can be. And
Yeah.
I think that finding that space and finding a space that's going to bring out the absolute best in you, like that takes some work, that takes some time. And so, and I think that once I was able to find that, it gave me the strength
Mhm.
to be a lot more courageous in everything that I did.
Yeah.
And to not worry as much when, when I was in a workspace and I was going up against, when I was facing some pressure to do something and I was challenging people, to not feel so emotional and insecure about that and to question myself so much.
Yeah, yeah. So the next question I have is what habits or routines with the helped you the most in this transformation?
What habits or routines helped me the most in this transformation?
Hmm.
Something that I started doing a few years ago, was I allowed myself to have a morning routine. And I am not a particularly like regimented person
Hmm.
when it comes to routines. So what a morning routine looked like for me, I lived in New York City, was I would wake up and my goal would be to get out of the house as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
Um, to get out of my apartment and get out into the world as quickly as possible after I woke up. And I
Hmm.
would allow myself 30 to 45 minutes outside of the house. Like I would go to a cafe, I'd go to a diner, I would walk around, I'd go to the park, um, I would read books, I would listen to podcasts,
Yeah.
I would pray. And that, I think taking that space for myself was really powerful. And then the other one
Hmm.
that I can think of was honestly going to church. And I know, um, there are a lot of people who are Christian who don't go to church, and I don't want to judge. Like
Yes.
people get to exercise their faith in their own way. I
Hmm.
personally have found that going to church regularly, even when I don't want to do it, has been really life-giving.
Yeah.
It has given me the strength to make choices that I would not have otherwise made.
Yes, yes. And my final question that I have for you would be what is the best way to deal with coworkers who challenge you or mock your beliefs?
Ooh, yeah. So I would say that there are, like, I'm trying to think of like ways in which I have been challenged or mocked in the workplace.
Mm,
And because I think that people don't super know that I'm a Christian, the way that I phrase my beliefs in the workplace, I don't phrase it with God language. People are generally not like being like, "Oh my gosh, you're a Christian." Like, what?
mm,
They're generally in the workplace how it comes across more as is you're being difficult, you know?
mm.
You're being difficult.
Yes.
And I think like the kind of response that I have to you're being difficult kind of ranges.
Mm,
I think the hardest thing to do is to go back into yourself and to know who you are and to reintegrate with your own value set and then to calibrate internally. And it's not that you can't take feedback because feedback is important. The Lord does work through other people.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, like you're calling on God
Hmm.
and you can't like, you know, some people just aren't going to get it.
Right.
And you just got to kind of keep going.
Yeah.
Um, I would say for people who like generally are skeptical of Christianity, I meet those people all of the time, like
Mhm.
mostly in church spaces, honestly. They show up in my church and they say, they say, yeah, I don't really like Christianity. And that's,
What?
that's a thing that people get to say and think like, people have been
Yeah.
hurt by the church. I get it. Um, and I try to treat those people with compassion, honestly, because a lot of them have been hurt by the church. And
Yeah.
so, um, yeah, I think just trying to be understanding of where people are coming from and to say, yeah, I get it. You've been hurt by the church. I'm a Christian. That's where we're at.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. So I just want you to know that I'm very thankful for you coming on the platform, sharing these nuggets and of wisdom and dropping these gems. Like I had this, I'm full, honey. I'm full.
Oh, thank you. This was so great. Thank you so much for having me. This was
Yes,
lovely.
yes, yes. You've had great feedback in the comments. And so I just want you to just take this moment to like give us some takeaways. Give us
Yeah.
an empowerment challenge that what we can do to move forward to remind us when we're difficult in a difficult when we're in a difficult space in work, how can we continue to put our center back on Christ?
Yeah, it's the hardest thing to do, but I would say that when you're in that space, when you are faced with a really tough choice at work, when you're faced with people with work who just don't get it, um, I think the hardest thing to do is to take a step away and to say, this is not my worth. This is not my value.
Mhm.
My value is in God.
Yeah.
And when you need to be reminded of that, you get to pray, to have those spiritual practices, and you get to go to your community and they can remind you that that is not who you are. Your work is not who you are. And I think today more than ever, that's something that a lot more people need to hear.
Yes, yes. You have final comment. Reverend Karen Moore says, "Thank you for sharing your insights. I really love your term, decentering work." So I really feel that we all have really learned something and we can be empowered to move forward in our journey in the workspace. So I really do appreciate everything. Can you please close us out? Before we close out the word of prayer, I want to let you know next week we have Lady Janelle Thomas that's coming on, and she's going to talk about the topic of so desperate. You don't want to miss this. Same time, same place on the Women's Empowerment Network Facebook page. So, Maddie, would you please close us out in the word of prayer?
Yes. Gracious God, thank you so much for bringing Rochelle and I together today to share a word about decentering work and about moving your center in general more towards you. Be with us as we go into this next week of work and life and faith. Let us know your presence, make your presence known in our lives and in all places, wherever we go, in our homes, in our workplaces. Give us the strength to stand strong when it is hard and to know that you are there with us as we make hard choices and as we are faced with all kinds of challenges. Be with us, God, and give us the strength and the community to tell us who we are, even when that seems difficult to know. We are forever grateful to you for being with us through all that we go through in our lives. Thank you so much. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Maddie. Thank you all for tuning in. See you next week.
See you next week. Okay, bye.
Bye.